If you had to name the most famous movie car ever, chances are it would be the Aston Martin DB5. Only 1,023 were ever produced, yet thanks to a bloke whose initials are 007, it's become immortalised.
The latest James Bond film, Spectre, is being filmed over there as we speak, because that is Pinewood Studios, where the Bond franchise has been filmed since it all began back in 1962. In fact, Daniel Craig's probably in there, killing someone with his bare hands.
We don't know yet whether the DB5 will feature in Spectre, but we'll seize any opportunity to drive the car. And while we're about it, we'll visit a few locations where Bond films have been shot.
Except this is not a DB5. In fact, it's not even an Aston Martin.
It's called the DB Speedback GT. It's the brainchild of a man called David Brown, who shares exactly the same name with a man who headed up Aston Martin from 1947 until 1972 and created the DB series of cars.
But that really is the only connection. Who would have thought that 40 odd years after the DB5 died, that another bloke set up a company to build a car that's more than similar?
Ian Fleming himself couldn't have dreamt up the story, but take another look and there are differences, quite big ones. For starters, the nose is more stretched and the grille doesn't have the unique Aston notches on the top. The roofline is sleeker and the rear wings less pronounced.
The car was designed by Alan Moberly, a chap that started his life designing for British Leyland. He did have some part in the Morris Marina, but we won't dwell on that because he's actually been responsible also for designing all of the Land Rover Discoveries to date.
Unlike the exterior, the Speedback's interior bears little resemblance to a DB5. Nevertheless, it's got proper British old-school feel.
What I do like about this car is they've got the rake quite old school. The A-pillar is quite upright, and also I can touch the windscreen, and that is something you really can't do on most modern cars, sports cars or not. You're a little bit more upright, the dash is shallower. You've got the tightly stitched leather over these massive heater outlets, these circular heater outlets on the top of the dash, and then in the middle you've got a circular clock which pokes its head up on the top of the dash. These are all proportions that you got in cars of the 60s.
Before you could say shaken, not stirred, I'd reached my first Bond film location.
This here is Brent Cross Shopping Centre in North London. Not massively exotic, and not the first location you expect a Bond film to be made, but this car park to my left actually doubled as a car park in Hamburg in 1997's Tomorrow Never Dies, and Piers Brosnan drives around that in the back of his BMW 750 IL, controlling the car with his telephone, as you do.
Where was I? Oh yeah, so the Speedback is different to the DB5 on the outside and on the inside.
But the really big changes are under the skin. Because whereas the DB5 was powered by a straight six 4-litre engine, this has got a supercharged V8.
The DB5 produced 285 horsepower, which was a lot for its day, but fast forward 40 years and you've got 500 horsepower. The engine is from a Jaguar XKR convertible. In fact, virtually all of the underpinnings, the chassis, brakes, steering, suspension, are all from that car.
So what you've got here is a Jag XKR convertible, which has been completely taken apart and stripped right back to its carcass, and then had a hand-formed, hand-beaten aluminium body grafted onto it. Coming up on the left is the IBM building, which doubled as Elliot Carver's Media Mogul building in Hamburg, in Tomorrow Never Dies film.
David Brown sees the Speedback very much as a grand tourer rather than a sports car, but even though it weighs close to 2 tonnes, it'll still get to 62 in 4.8 seconds and go on to a limited 155.
Okay, so coming up here on the left is the old War Office, better known in James Bond world as the MI6 HQ. And that was in 3 Bond films, View to a Kill, Licence to Kill and Octopussy.
So how much will the Speedback cost you? Well, £5,000,000. Yeah, around £500,000 plus Her Majesty's taxes.
That's more than 6 brand new Jag XKRs, price-wise, which is, it's just daft.
However, at least you'll be guaranteed exclusivity for that price, because only 100 Speedbacks will ever be built, and right now only one exists. Perhaps that's why it was insured for £1.4 million. I was now nearing the end of my journey, but there was still time to point out one final movie location.
Okay, this is Vauxhall Cross, and that there is M's HQ in the latter Bond films, like Skyfall, for example, where it got blown up. As you can see, it's a real building, which is kind of handy because that really is where spies work. That is the HQ of MI6 in Britain.
So, what are my final conclusions about the Speedback?
Mr. Brown's brainchild doesn't so much rewrite a rulebook so much as continue an old British tradition of basing an evocative, glamorous GT on less glamorous underpinnings. The thing about the Speedback is it's got just enough retro and just enough modern to make it feel exciting and, crucially, to make it feel beautifully British and eccentric. The trouble I have with it is it's 3 times more expensive than it ought to be. Crikey. Bloody hell. What am I going to tell David?